They don't pay us to think. They pay us to know. We know we can beat them. There's no excuses why we shouldn't. Win the game, period. W is on 3, man. Let's go. W on 3. 1, 2, 3, W.
Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report, episode 3 of my 3-part series entitled Redskins Offseason Playbook. And so I bet you thought I forgot about you. I could never forget about the fam. When are you guys going to understand? I may stray from time to time, but I'll always come back home. Home is where the heart is. Home is where I belong. I'll never be gone for too long. And so here I am, back like cook crack, talking about our beloved Washington Redskins. And we're going to finish up this series. We've already done part 1, the draft, part 2, free agency frenzy, now part 3, roster management, to wrap up this series. And it will be a perfect segue to Thursday night. And we're going to have 2 live streams talking about the draft and the Washington Redskins, the first of which will be Thursday. This Thursday night, 9 p.m. sharp, we'll be here talking Redskins draft 2019. What should the Redskins do? Should they go after Josh Rosen, which it seems like maybe they're not as aggressive right now with that situation, but you know, this thing is so fluid. It changes very rapidly. Every single day we hear something new with that situation. So we'll keep our ears to the street, but we'll talk about that and the fortunes of the Redskins in this particular draft and where the Redskins need to strike at 15 if they are to stay at 15. They could move up, back. Who knows? We'll see. But we'll take it as is. I want to hear from you guys what you think the Redskins need to do, what they need to address early, what they need to address often. Do they need to go heavy on offense? Do they need to go heavy on defense? What do you think the Redskins need to do in the first 2 days of the draft? What do you think the Redskins need to do as a whole? We'll attack all of these issues and more on Thursday night, sharp at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, talking NFL draft, specifically Redskins draft. Thursday night, 9 p.m., we'll talk draft. So join me live as we chop it up talking Redskins 2019 NFL draft. That being said, we're going to finish up this series talking about roster management. Nothing has changed with the way I feel about this football team. Still think this is a double-digit loss football team. I don't think that 2019 is a season in which the Redskins can be very successful. Sure, the ball could bounce the Redskins' way. The defense could be much improved. All of those things could happen, and I still think that this is a team that is lacking in a number of different areas that will stop us from being a successful team. Now, I will say that the schedule going to be released, I believe, sometime this week. It's very advantageous if things hold up, but again, you can never play the schedule game. But the fact that we play the AFC East, which isn't a very good division, we also play the NFC North, which, yeah, it looks good on paper, but there are beatable teams in that division as well. Obviously, the Redskins play the NFC East. That's our division. There are winnable games on the schedule, and if the ball bounces the Redskins' way, hey, who knows what could happen? I don't foresee the Redskins being good enough to take advantage of some opportunities that may or may not come their way. Bottom line is, we still need to see how the Redskins can improve to put themselves in a position in case they do find a way to get lucky in the draft and get a quarterback or something of that magnitude and maybe be able to have the infrastructure of a roster that's good enough to win sooner rather than later. So let's talk about the first thing that I want to address, because we really haven't had a chance here because of how long I've been gone. And I've done a lot of things. I've moved. I've relocated. So I've got a lot of things going on. And that's another part of the reason why I've been gone so long. But that's nor here nor there. We haven't had a chance to really talk about all of the free agent acquisitions the Redskins have made in totality. We talked about them individually, the ones that have happened that have been big, the Landon Collins signing, we talked about that. We talked about the Case Keenum trade, but we haven't talked about all of the other moves in between. And so let's talk about the free agency period for the Redskins thus far up until this point and where that takes us into the roster management discussion. So let's start there with the moves the Redskins have made in free agency And let's start with Landon Collins, the big free agency get for the Redskins this offseason. 6 years, $84 million. We know that deal isn't as egregious as the numbers sound. I've always said that we do a great job. We don't do a great job in a lot of things. The Redskins do a great job with managing contracts. We've always talked about how we've got one of the better cap guys in the league in terms of making the numbers dance. And Eric Schaefer, he did it again. He did it again with the Landon Collins deal. And so Landon Collins is going to come in and hopefully bolster what has been a very lackluster secondary for quite some time. We haven't had a stud at the safety position since Sean Taylor. May he rest in peace. I'm not saying Landon Collins is Sean Taylor, but I think he can be a very solid piece. And what we're hoping is a building block towards a foundation that will foster change in a secondary that has been one of the weaker links of the Redskins on the defensive side of the football. Now you look at Eric Flowers, a guy that the Redskins signed as an offensive tackle. There has been rumors about him potentially playing guard. Until the Redskins announced that he's going to make the transition to guard, I'm looking at him as a backup tackle. The Redskins have him listed as a tackle on their website. So as of right now, I look at Eric Flowers as a backup tackle, which scares me half to death. Now, what I'm hoping is that with Ty Nsekhe departing to Buffalo, that Jerron Christian is ready to assume that swing tackle role and that we never have to see Eric Flowers grace the field in a Washington Redskins uniform. If he hits the field in any capacity, tackle, guard, doesn't matter, we are in trouble. I hope you understand that. If you watch this guy, whether it's in Jacksonville or in New York with the Giants, you know that this man stinks. There is nothing that he brings to the table in terms of value. Honestly, don't understand the signing, but it's depth on a Redskins roster that needs depth, especially along the offensive line. Not all depth, it's good depth, but we'll see what he brings to the table. A lot of people want to give him the benefit of the doubt because we have Bill Callahan. I don't even know what that means anymore, okay? Bottom line is, if Eric Flowers is on the field, we're probably in more trouble than we already are on the season. Period. End of discussion. Case Keenum, we talked about the trade. It's a very advantageous trade for the Redskins. Redskins only give up a 6th rounder in 2020. Meanwhile, they get Case Keenum and his 1-year, $3.5 million contract in addition to a 7th rounder in 2020. So it's a big win for the Redskins in terms of getting a guy that we feel like can play all 16 games if need be. He's a stark contrast to Colt McCoy in that regard, but he's just like Colt McCoy. He's going to win you some games. He's going to lose you some games. He's Case Keenum. Again, nothing to get excited about, but it's good to know that there is some kind of stability at the quarterback position. Whether we draft a young quarterback or we don't, I feel confident that Case Keenum, if he has to, can start 16 games. So there's that. And I fully expect him to be the week 1 starter, whether we draft a young guy or not. The only way he's not the week 1 starter is if the Redskins trade for Josh Rosen. Again, another conversation for another day. You look at Adrian Peterson. I didn't think he was coming back at the running back position. I honestly thought he was going to parlay his successful 2018 campaign in which he rushed for over 1,000 yards. I thought he was going to hightail it out of here and find a competitive, contending football team. He's never won a Super Bowl, and at this point of his career, not only does he want to play, but I thought he wanted to play for a team that had a chance, a realistic one, to win a Super Bowl. I thought he was going to Chicago. That's where I thought he was going to go. I was wrong. And so he's back in Washington with the Redskins. And I think at this point of his career, too, it really means a lot to him to just play. You know, when he was in New Orleans, when he was in Arizona, and the playing time and the opportunities were sparse, he wasn't happy. And I think he loved and relished the opportunity in Washington to be the workhorse again, the guy that was the bell cow. Now, that role is going to change significantly in 2019 with Darius Geis's health. Again, assuming he's healthy in 2019, our 2nd-round pick from last year, if Geis is in the mix, you got to think that Adrian Peterson isn't going to have many 25-carry games like he did last year. And on at least 4 or 5 different occasions, Adrian Peterson eclipsed 20, let's call it 23 carries in any given game. And so I can't imagine that happening if there's a healthy Darius Geis this season. So we'll see what his role is, but it's good to have him back in the fold. And again, they didn't overspend to bring him back. I didn't have a problem with the move. I just didn't think it was going to take place, but it did. Good to have him back. He was outstanding for us last season. And finally, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie comes out of retirement. Again, another one of these signings. I honestly don't know what this means. I don't know how much he has left in the tank. I mean, the guy didn't play football really last year. Last time we saw him was in an Oakland Raiders uniform, and it wasn't pretty. I don't even know what this means. His contract isn't guaranteed, so if it doesn't work out, if the Redskins don't like what they see, they can cut him, and there will be no penalty to do so. So, again, this is a low-risk, high-reward type of signing, but again, he's a veteran corner, and we've got a ton of corners, as you're about to see as we go through the list of Redskins on the roster currently, and who I think are prominent Redskins with a role on this team as of right now as the Redskins roster is constructed. So those are the free agent acquisitions. I think Daniel Snyder wanted a much bigger, grandiose offseason. It started with Landon Collins. You heard how aggressively they went after another Alabama player in C.J. Mosley. They were looking to make bigger splashes in free agency, and they just fell short. And remember, when it comes to free agency, half of the battle is the other player or the player in question wanting to play for your organization. All right? You can have all the money in the world, and you can have all of the desire to bring that guy in. If he doesn't want to play for your team, it doesn't matter. And remember, where we sit right now as an organization, not many guys want to come here. Just look at the list of guys that you're staring at right now, and that tells you all you need to know. Sans for Landon Collins on that list, along with Adrian Peterson, those guys don't get you excited at all whatsoever. And honestly speaking, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie is coming out of retirement. The Redskins were sniffing around the guy and Kenny Britt that didn't play football last year. Several of the coaches on the staff weren't coaching last year, including Rob Ryan and Ray Horton. So there are a number of guys that are here because they didn't have any other options. This was their way back into football. So again, these moves don't get you excited, but nonetheless, let's go to the Redskins and let's look at the roster, and we'll start with the offensive side of the football. So roster management, this is what I think the Redskins should do, what I think they're going to do ultimately. And again, this is going to lead us right into the draft talk on Thursday. And I'll rehash this on Thursday night to get the conversation started, because a lot of this is pertinent in terms of needs going into the draft and how you feel about this team moving forward. So you look at the Redskins on the offensive side of the football, quarterbacks. If you listen to Jay Gruden talk in the meetings out in Arizona, he made it very clear that he's not a fan of carrying 3 quarterbacks on the roster. So barring some kind of big-time get at the quarterback position with a young guy at 15, Drew Lock. I don't see the Redskins carrying 3 quarterbacks. I really don't, because Jay Gruden made it abundantly clear. Now, again, Jay's not in control of the roster, but Jay's made it clear that he's not a fan of carrying 3 quarterbacks. Now, here's the thing. Alex Smith not going to be on the roster in terms of a roster spot. So even though he's on the list, he's costing us a fortune in terms of his contract, but he's not going to be on the Redskins. He's not going to count against the Redskins 53-man roster because he's not playing in 2019. And honestly, if you ask me, I don't think he's ever playing football again. But again, another story for another day. Case Keenum, Colt McCoy are your 2 quarterbacks on the roster right now. And to me, there are 3 scenarios that can play out with the Redskins at the quarterback position. One, you could have a situation where the Redskins draft a young quarterback and keep Case Keenum and Colt McCoy on the roster. Or you could go in a different direction and draft a young quarterback, get rid of Colt McCoy, and keep Case Keenum. And that would be the 2 quarterbacks you go into the season with. I don't see that happening. If they draft a young quarterback, I don't think they want to play that young quarterback right away. And I think the way you don't have to play that young quarterback is you keep Case Keenum and Colt McCoy on the roster to ensure that if one of those guys were to go down, you don't have to just thrust that young guy in. Let's say you have Case Keenum as your week 1 starter. He gets hurt in week 3, and all of a sudden you got to throw in the rookie in week 3 and he's not ready. You don't want to do that, so you would keep both of those guys on the roster. But then you've got another scenario in which the Redskins trade for Josh Rosen. In that case, I think you definitely see them cut ties with a guy like Colt McCoy potentially, and you get Rosen in there, and I think Rosen's your week 1 starter. If the Redskins don't do any of the first two and decide, or we don't like any of the other quarterbacks, the guys that we liked, they were gone before we had a chance to get them at 15, and we didn't trade for Rosen, you can see a situation where the Redskins go into the season with Case Keenum and Colt McCoy at quarterback, and that's the situation. And honestly, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think that they need to go into the season with the young developmental quarterback at worst, but if they didn't, it really doesn't make a difference. If the quarterback that you have on the roster isn't the quarterback of the future, who cares if you draft a guy in the 4th round or you get an undrafted rookie or a late round selection at the quarterback position? He's probably not going to be the quarterback of the future. He's just a developmental guy. If you develop him and you like him, best case scenario, he's a quality backup. Worst case scenario, you draft the guy, you spend a couple of years, and then you let him go to Philadelphia and he ends up playing well there. Who knows? We've seen that story play out here as well, too. So, bottom line is, the Redskins have 2 quarterbacks right now, and it's going to be really intriguing over the next week and a half as to how that quarterback position changes, if it changes at all. You look at the running back position, I think that's pretty much etched in stone. I don't expect the Redskins to do anything in the draft. Here, you got Adrian Peterson, Darius Guice, Chris Thompson, and Samaje Perine. I expect those 4 guys, barring injury, to make the roster, and those will be your... Now, Samaje could be the odd man out. They could keep 3 running backs. I think they're going to keep 4. I don't see Samaje going anywhere. So I think that's one of the stronger positions on the offensive side of football. We don't have many. That's one of the few on the offensive side of football that's pretty much intact. Receiver, it's a mess. And there's really... Let's look at the position first. Josh Doctson, Paul Richardson Jr., Trey Quinn, Brian Quick, Robert Davis, Cam Sims. To me, you got 6 guys that have a realistic shot at making the roster. There are many other guys on the roster right now. There are about 10 receivers on the roster right now because, you know, the roster is expanded to 90 all the way until you get down to the roster cut. So there are a bunch of guys. I think there are 6 right now that have a legitimate shot at making the roster. Those are the 6. Now, when you look at guys that can actually contribute, Doctson, Richardson, Quinn, right now, for me, are the 3 guys. I know a lot of you love Cam Sims. He got injured last year. Still don't really know what this guy can do. You look at Robert Davis. Jay Gruden loves Robert Davis. Robert Davis can't stay healthy. 2 years on the roster, 2 injuries that didn't allow him to play a single regular season game. And Brian Quick seems to be the security blanket. He plays good on special teams. And every now and again in a pinch, he can play receiver for you. I'm not a huge Brian Quick fan. I'd love to replace Brian Quick and a number of guys on that list with actual quality wide receivers that can help contribute, but we'll see what they decide to do. I think they have to address receiver via the draft. At least one of their selections in the 2019 NFL draft, I think, should be on receiver, but we will see what happens. To me, 3 of those guys are locks to make the roster in Doctson, Richardson, and Quinn. I think the other 3 roster spots are up for debate. Quick, Davis, and Sims. I think of the 3, Sims has probably the best shot of making the roster, but we'll see what happens with that group of receivers. You go to the tight end position. It's interesting here. I've got 4 tight ends. I think they're only going to keep 3 when it's all said and done. I honestly still think Vernon Davis is going to be cut. I think they didn't cut ties with Davis because they want to see if they can land a tight end in the draft. If they don't get one to their liking, then they'll hold on to Davis. I think if they're able to get a guy that they like and think can help them, because we've heard Jay Gruden talk about the importance of having a tight end on this roster that can come in and block and catch it and have them be able to be a little bit more effective in the run game as a blocker, and still be able to catch it and not be a tell, as we saw with Jeremy Sprinkle last year. Whenever he was in the game, 90% of the time it was a run. And so they're trying to get away from that. And so I think they're going to do something at tight end. It wouldn't shock me if they added a tight end and then got rid of Vernon Davis and saved them some cap space in the process. But right now I've got Reed, Davis, Sprinkle, and Matt Flanagan as the 4 tight ends. Flanagan can easily be replaced. But again, we'll see what happens with that group there as well. Offensive tackle, you've got 4 right now that look like locks to make the roster in Trent Williams, Morgan Moses, Jerron Christian, and Eric Flowers. Now, again, Flowers, there's no guarantee there, but I don't see them getting rid of him. But Williams, Moses, and Jerron Christian, all locks. So you've got 3 tackles for sure there. Eric Flowers, I think, rounds out that group and gives you your 4th and final tackle on the roster. Offensive guard, this is a really bad position for the Redskins right now. This is a desperate need. Look at this group here. You've got Brandon Sheriff, and then the other 5 guys on this list, I don't think are even worthy of a roster spot necessarily. Now, that tells you there's not another starter on that list, okay? There's 6 in total. 1 guy worthy of starting, which is Brandon Sheriff, which the Redskins should have been working out a deal with him on a long-term extension. Again, takes 2 to tango. The Redskins could have extended the deal to Sheriff. He could have looked at that deal, laughed as they did with Kirk Cousins. They could have tried to lowball him. And he says, you know what? I'll wait till free agency. The Redskins are missing the boat here. But again, you don't know what the situation is. I don't like to point fingers when it comes to contractual situations because until we know what's been extended to Sheriff and what the dialogue is, we can't really make judgment because the Redskins could have extended a great offer to him and he could have said, nah, I'm good. I'm going to wait till free agency. Thanks anyway. So we don't know what the situation is. All I know is he's not extended yet. And we can't afford to let Brandon Sheriff go. So I know that. But in any event, Tyler Catalina, Celeste Ufade is a guy that he's interesting because he came from the AAF. And I don't actually know how good he is or not, but we'll see if he can play or not. I'm not banking a starting position and risking not getting someone in the draft on an AAF product. So Kyle Fuller and Zach Karen both had to play last year towards the end of the season when we were decimated at guard. Look, we need probably 2 guards. Not 1. We probably need 2 guards. So they got to do something in the draft at that position. That's not an if, it's a when in the draft at guard. We need help, and we need it bad at the guard position. And in center, Chase Roullier, Casey Dunn. I think the Redskins feel good about Chase Roullier. If they add another guy that is a guard that can play center, I'm all for it. But that's what the offensive side of the football looks like as we look at the defensive side of the football. The strongest position the Redskins have is the defensive line. Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Matt Ioannidis, Tim Settle, and Caleb Brantley. We're set there. They don't need to do another thing along the defensive line. We're fine there. Edge rusher, we desperately need to address this position. To me, if you're not getting a quarterback at 15, the first position you need to be taking a look at is edge rusher at 15 because as you look at that list, Ryan Kerrigan, Ryan Anderson, and Casanova McKenzie, we have nothing at edge rusher right now outside of Kerrigan. We don't know what Ryan Anderson is. I think I know what he is, but not a large enough sample size. But I never liked Ryan Anderson. You already know that. You know how I feel about Ryan Anderson. And so he's going to get an opportunity this year. He's going to have to step up. We'll see what he does. I hope I'm wrong about him. I don't think I am, but I hope I'm wrong. Casanova McKenzie has shown flashes off the edge, but we need a true havoc-wreaking, fear-inducing pass rusher. We can potentially get that at 15. I'd love the Redskins to address. We don't have any edge rushers. We got 3 guys. Obviously, there are about 3 more guys that you could term edge rushers on the roster right now. They're not making the team. We have nothing at edge rusher right now. You look at inside linebacker. This is another position that's starting to round into shape. Mason Foster is still on the roster. Reuben Foster is on the roster. Sean Deon Hamilton, Josh Harvey Clemens are your 4 guys inside right now that, for me, are locks to make the roster. Mason Foster is still a question mark. He could be a June 1 cap casualty. I don't see it happening. But if they add a linebacker that they really like in this draft, who's to say? We'll see. Those are the 4 guys that I look at and say, okay, they've got roster spots on this team. And then you move forward after you get through the draft and see what the damage is there. But if they do nothing else at inside linebacker, I'm fine with those 4 guys. being guys that we count on going into the regular season. Cornerback. I know a lot of people list cornerback as a need in the draft, and we'll talk about that on the Thursday live program. Remember, for those of you who showed up late, jumped in the middle of this, we're going to be live at 9 o'clock Thursday night. Check us out here, Louie T Network. Come join the discussion, Redskins 2019 NFL Draft. We're going to be here chopping it up, talking Redskins Draft live. So come and be a part of the discussion. But nonetheless, the cornerback position, to me, I said it last year, I feel the same way this year. It's not a need. You just need young guys to continue to develop, and you need to stay healthy. That was the biggest problem last year, was Quentin Dunbar's injury really affected us. So did the injury to Joshua Halsey. If guys stay healthy, we would have had a solid group of corners last year. I feel the same way this year. Adonis Alexander is a year better. I feel like in a year more mature in the league. He didn't play a ton last year, but he's a year more mature in the league. You got a lot of experience for Stroman and Danny Johnson. I don't know if those guys are going to even make the roster. There are 8 names on this list right now. We're not keeping 8 corners, okay? So that tells you how much depth right now the Redskins have at corner. I don't think it's a need right now. I just think we need to stay healthy. Now, how does Quentin Dunbar heal up? Because anytime you're talking about nerve damage and the healing of a nerve, you just don't know. We've seen that over the years. All right. So this list looks as follows: Josh Norman, Quentin Dunbar, Thad Moreau, Adonis Alexander, Greg Stroman, Danny Johnson, Joshua Halsey, and Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. That's 8 corners. You're probably going to end up keeping 5, 6 max. Bottom line is we've got enough stuff there to work with. And so I'm not hard-pressed for the Redskins to go out and draft a corner, especially early when we have more pressing needs than the cornerback position. If you get a cornerback late that you like, fine, knock yourself out. But for me, I look at the cornerback position, and I think we're just fine for right now. If they were to take a guy, I wouldn't be upset, but I don't think it's one of the dire needs on this football team. Safety, you've got 4 right now that are presumably going to make this football team, barring any changes. Obviously, Landon Collins. Monte Nicholson is interesting. If you feel like Monte can get back to where he was in 2017, when the Redskins were talking about him going into the 2018 season as the defensive version of Jordan Reed, then you've got a safety tandem that could be hellacious. We all know that Monte's talented, but he had the whole incident at Loudon 1 where he got into the little scuffle. He was suspended for the remainder of the year. There are a number of questions as to why he wasn't playing more. First, we thought it was injury. Then we found out it really wasn't injury. There's a lot going on with Monte Nicholson. We hope he can get his act together because the guy is talented. But nonetheless, Troy Apke is a guy you drafted. Look, Troy Apke wasn't a baller at Penn State. So I don't really know what they're expecting out of him. He was a hell of a special teams player at Penn State. The guy is athletic. I don't know if they feel like he has the potential to be a starter moving forward or what. He got injured last year, so he didn't get the experience that we were hoping he could get last year. Bottom line is, he's another guy you throw into the mix. He's not going anywhere. They spent the mid-round pick on him. He's going to be on the roster. And DeShazer Everett is Mr. Steady. He's never good enough to start, but you always want DeShazer Everett around because you feel good that you have a guy like DeShazer in a pinch that you can throw into the game if need be. And so he's always around, but we don't view him as a starting caliber safety. So if they add another safety in this draft, again, wouldn't be upset about it at all, but don't necessarily know if that's a dire need, if that's on the front burner. I think it's something that's definitely in consideration on the back burner, definitely. But if you're talking the first 3 rounds, I don't think you should be taking a safety or a corner. Now, again, best player available, if that happens to be corner or safety, I can't be mad at that at all. But if you're looking at needs that the Redskins have, you're hoping that needs and best player available kind of mesh together and kind of are on a crash course with one another, and they meet, and you're able to get players that fill some really big holes on this Redskins roster. Obviously, the specialist positions aren't going to change. We really don't need to talk about them, but just for the sake of argument, Tress Way as the punter, Dustin Hopkins as our place kicker, and Nick Sundberg as our long snapper. Those aren't going to change. So That's the Redskins roster as we see it right now. A lot of things have to change with this Redskins roster moving forward. I just see the Redskins right now in a position where you got some decisions to make going into the draft. You've got some decisions to make on some roster spots after the draft. And again, I think some of the roster moves will be dictated off of what you get in the draft. If we get another tight end, I think Vernon Davis is as good as gone. You look at the linebacker position. Mason Foster could be a casualty if you get a linebacker that you like in the draft. There are a number of different things. If Rosen is traded for, does that affect Colt McCoy? If you get a young quarterback, does that affect Colt McCoy? We'll see. There's so many different things that could play out. What do the Redskins do at receiver? We've got a number of spots available, I think, at the receiver position. You lose Crowder, and you really don't have anybody there on the roster that jumps out at you. Doxson is a guy that I don't know if they're going to pick up his fifth-year option. I don't think they love Josh Doxson's potential moving forward. So you may need a ton of receivers moving forward. So a lot of questions, not enough answers as we sit here today on April 15th. But answers are coming. Best believe that. We'll find out a lot over the next 2 weeks or so about the Redskins and the direction of this roster in some regard moving forward. So I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold until we meet again. Hey, to our beloved Washington Redskins. I'll see you guys on Thursday night. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage it could be. Come back and join me, your man, Louie T, here on the Redskins Report live Thursday night, 9 o'clock, as we talk Redskins in the 2019 NFL Draft. I'll see you then. Have a good one.
Louie T Network.